I'm excited to present to you about our work, how child welfare workers reduce racial disparity in algorithmic decision. My name is Cheng, and joining me to present today is Logan Stapleton. And this work is made possible by our great team of collaborators from Carnegie Mellon University, University of Minnesota, and UC Berkeley, including our wonderful chair of this session, who is actually my advisor. If you pay attention to the news in the past few years, you wouldn't be surprised to know that AI-powered decision-making tools are actually being increasingly deployed in various high-stakes contexts, and that will include healthcare, hiring decisions, education, criminal justice, and social work. Now, these algorithms are being deployed and used under the premises that they will increase the decision's quality, and that might include decision accuracy. On the other hand, we also learned that racial disparity has been found to deeply rooted in many of these algorithms, which cause many aversion and pushback and cautious about using these algorithms in large scale. Now, many solutions has been proposed. One of such is using human-AI collaboration, and that means combining and involving both humans and AI into the process of decision-making. Now, we know that in many high-stake contexts, people of certain race are overly represented, and therefore human decisions are racially disparate. If we train an AI to make a decision using these historical data, they will also learn from these data to make disparate decisions of their own. Now the question is, if we combine human and AI together to make this decision, what is going to happen? Now, we conducted our study in the context of child maltreatment call screening. To give you a brief recap, each year in the US, there are millions of child maltreatment referral calls that come into the government, and the government call screener has to manually review these cases. For the severe case, they have to screen in for investigation, and for the others, they can screen them out. Many algorithmic tools have been deployed and developed to help these call screeners make these decisions. One of such is the Allegheny family screening tool. Now, the algorithm will provide the call screener recommendations, and the call screeners, after reviewing that recommendation, can make their own final decisions. To give you a preview of our results, we actually found that in child maltreatment, the human-AI collaborated decisions have an 11% lower disparity than the algorithm alone. For the rest of our talk, we're going to tell you how does that happen. But we want to establish a few understandings first. First of all, the primary racial disparity that we report in this paper are merely the difference in the screen-in rate between black and white children. And the racial disparity on their own does not imply unfairness. However, racial disparity in screening rate indicate there's uneven applications of investigation or interventions to the black and white families. And potentially this means there's uneven distributions of benefits and harms. I'm going to talk about a research question and design next, and Logan will talk about our results and contributions. For our research question, we're interested in knowing when humans work with algorithms in child welfare context that is known to have racial disparities, whether this collaboration will serve to mitigate or exacerbate the biases, the disparities. For the study design, we created two decision-making paradigms. For the AI-only paradigms, we created the hypothetical scenario where the AFST algorithm will screen all the high-risk cases and screen out all the moderate and low-risk cases. For the human-AI scenario, they are the actual decisions made by these call screeners after they take in the recommendations from the AFST algorithms. We also evaluate it using two different metrics. The first one is the screen-in rate disparities. And that is simply the differences in the screening disparities between black and white children. The second one is the accuracy disparities, which we measure that using a proxy of the AFST predictions. We conducted a study with a mixed method design. For the quantitative part, we got a 2-year call screening data. We primarily focus on the white and black race since they are the largest demographic in the data set. And we run the analysis on the child level. For the qualitative analysis, we conducted contextual inquiry and semi-structured interview with 9 call screeners and 4 supervisors. Now Logan is going to tell you about our quantitative findings first.
Thanks, Xiaofei. Can everybody hear me? Great. Our main finding is that AFST-only decisions would have been more racially disparate than worker AFST decisions. So from 2016 to 2018, the AFST-only disparity was 20%, because 71% of black children would have been screened in, and 51% of white children would have been screened in by the AFST on its own. Over that same time period, the worker AFST disparity was 9%. So workers using the algorithm reduced the disparity in algorithmic recommendations. And to reiterate, we don't say whether these disparities indicate systemic racism or whether they're justified. These are larger conversations in child welfare literature that we refrain from commenting on in this paper. However, disparities, especially screen-in rate disparities, are important because they indicate uneven levels of state intervention into white and black families, as well as uneven distributions of the harms and benefits of that intervention. We also measured disparities in terms of accuracy. Hopefully it'll go. I'm just going to click. And we found as well that the AFST on its own was more racially disparate in terms of accuracy, and that workers used the AFST to reduce this disparity as well. We note that the county government we worked with sent us new data and pre-processing instructions about a week ago, and we reran all of our quantitative analyses on that new data. We put up a full description of the data and pre-processing on archive, so feel free to check that out. Importantly, all the specific numbers in our paper changed under this new data, but the main findings remain consistent and robust to changes in data and pre-processing. So the AFST-only decisions were still more disparate than worker AFST decisions, and workers used the AFST to reduce these disparities. They did so by disagreeing with the AFST's recommendations in specific ways. And to understand how workers disagreed and reduced these disparities, we actually talked with the workers who use the AFST day to day. We have a number of hypotheses as to how workers use the AFST to reduce disparities. First off, workers made holistic decisions. They used all available information and context and viewed the algorithm as a source of extra information rather than as a strict guide. One worker said they take the algorithm's recommendations into consideration, but they don't make decisions based on it. Second, workers said they adjusted for what they saw as erroneous over and underscoring of families based on how much system involvement they had, right? System involvement would be like criminal records, past child welfare cases, or even public benefits and services. So because government involvement is correlated with class and race, workers thought that this was a reason why the AFST gave racially disparate recommendations. For example, one worker said if you're poor and you're on welfare, you're going to score higher than a family who has private insurance. By correcting for these patterns of over and underscoring, we hypothesize that this is one of the main ways workers reduce disparities. We note that most workers say they corrected for the AFST's erroneous over and underscoring without explicitly looking at the race of the family, and so these corrections may have been unintentional. However, a few workers said that they intentionally look at race to correct for systemic biases in government data and reporting. One worker said that white people aren't reported as much as black kids. Another said that the whole system is racially biased and that affects the algorithm. So a few workers said they intentionally looked at race to screen these calls and correct for systemic biases, but for most it was unintentional and based on factors that are correlated with race. Regardless, the effect of reducing disparities was the same. Why is this important? I want to contextualize our contributions in prior work. So prior work on the AFST specifically has said that the AFST reduces disparities. This is based on an audit commissioned by the Allegheny County government. However, when we look at the same data as this county commission audit, we found that the algorithm was giving more racially disparate recommendations to workers and that workers used the AFST in such a way to reduce racial disparities in the algorithm. Not only does this complicate the narrative around the AFST, but it complicates prior work on humans in the loop more generally. For example, a 2019 study on a pretrial risk assessment used in Kentucky found that judges disagreed with this algorithm to actually increase racial disparities. Our work finds the opposite, that workers use the AFST to reduce disparities. And we also give qualitative hypotheses for how this happened, namely through holistic decision-making and adjusting for limitations in the algorithm. Finally, some implications for our findings. First, we caution against automation in racially disparate domains, and by automation, I don't just mean all or nothing automation, all computer or all human, right? Automation is a sliding scale that depends on how much leeway people have to disagree with an algorithm. So we even caution against forms of soft automation like institutional or bureaucratic pressures on workers to conform to the algorithm, which may increase disparities. So second, if algorithms continue to be used in these domains, we give a number of recommendations to empower workers to leverage the strength of AI, but apply their discretion, especially when overriding decisions that they think are inaccurate or worsen disparities. We give both technical design suggestions, for example, explainable interfaces to help workers better decide when to override the tool, and non-technical suggestions, for example, structuring the workplace to allow for more collaborative decision-making. This is the end of the presentation for the paper, but I want to quick plug our concurrent paper led by Kawakami. This paper that I'm presenting focuses on racial disparities specifically, but if you're interested in more specifics about human-AI collaboration with the AFST, please go check that out tomorrow afternoon. And finally, please check out the full paper and the extended analysis on arXiv as well. If you have any questions, you can email me or Hao-Fei. Our emails are listed there. Thank you to all the co-authors listed there, and thank you for listening.